Regenerative Climate Resilient Seascapes. In the Science for Climate Action Pavilion, we are streaming live online also, so welcome anyone who is online. We would like to start by extending our heartfelt thanks to our pavilion host, WMO, IPCC, and Mary Foundation, in particular to our sponsor to this event, the Mary Foundation, for all the support in making this exciting event possible. This event is hosted by IUCN, Mission Inclusion, and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. I am delighted to moderate this session. I am Ali Reza Rizvi. I am Global Head for Climate Change at IUCN and also Head of Human Rights and Conservation at IUCN. So for our event today, we will open with an address for IUCN Patron of Nature, Francisca Cortez Solari, followed by a range of presentation for across the science, finance and partnerships sector. And we have a lot to get through, so I would like to now introduce Francisca Cortez Solari, who will give the opening remarks. So over to you.
Thank you. Patricia Morales me va a traducir.
I'm going to translate.
Ya, Patricia. Aló. No.
We can hear you.
¿Ese micrófono?
Sí, se te
Aló.
oye. Se te oye.
Ahí se escucha, ya. Bueno, muchas gracias. Darle la bienvenida a este panel tan importante que tiene que ver también con la resiliencia del cambio climático.
That is related to the resilience of the climate change.
Agradecer a todos los participantes porque hemos visto cómo esta COP ha habido mucho más participación, nos hemos atrevido mucho más a avanzar más en los lenguajes, a proponer más desafíos.
To go further in the languages and put challenges to the panelists.
Entendiendo de que no hay tiempo y ya lo sabemos, ya todos sabemos lo que está pasando en el mundo y hoy en día tenemos que atrevernos a ser creativos, a entregar propuestas distintas y lo más importante de todo es que de alguna manera podamos unir las conversaciones.
So we understand that we don't have time anymore, that we need to be creative, we need to put all the effort together and work together to face.
Unir las conversaciones significa trabajar con la sociedad civil, pública y privada y lograr objetivos comunes para lograr las metas que nos hemos propuesto. Sabemos que no estamos alcanzando las metas y yo creo que también tenemos que sincerarnos nosotros mismos y entrar en la realidad
and be realistic
y desafiarnos cada uno donde trabajamos, donde participamos de su lugar de
in our own
incidencia.
works and our lives.
Tenemos que atrevernos a buscar nuevos financiamientos, por eso creo que la filantropía también es muy importante hoy en día.
This is why the philanthropy is really
No
important right
solamente
now.
la importancia de la responsabilidad social
Not only
empresarial
in terms
que
of
hoy día debería ser
social
como
responsibility
muy bien generado como
companies,
políticas públicas.
But also understanding that we need to develop public policy for helping philanthropy.
Y obviamente, bueno, la filantropía, que es algo que he levantado yo hace 25 años, que nos ha permitido poder tener
From my
muy
side,
buenas
I have
relaciones
been
con
working
IPCC, con
through philanthropy for
WMO,
25
con
years.
Decado en el
That
Océano,
allows
UICN,
to develop a very good relationship with
Universidad
IPCC,
Costa Azul.
WMO, University Costa
Así que
Azul,
muy
UCN.
agradecida que
I'm
tengan
very
una muy buena
grateful to
conversación
have you
y que
there.
vayamos
I
buscando
hope you will have a very good
desafíos y ojalá
conversation
que,
and
bueno,
that
siempre
you
que
will be
tengan en
able to
cuenta que
find
somos
new
también una gran
challenges
familia,
and understand that we
que no
are all a
estamos
huge
solos, tenemos
family,
que
that we are not
apoyarnos
alone.
unos a otros,
We
somos
need
una
to support
familia.
each other and we are a
Gracias.
family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisca. It's great. You rightly said that time is essence. We have already done so much damage, so now working together and, philanthropy and everyone come together, and there need to be a policy also so that whatever investment is done by philanthropy can be maximized. So thank you for this. So now I would like to now introduce Dr. Samir Donner. Dr. Donner is an interdisciplinary climate scientist and professor at the University of British Columbia, where he teaches and conducts research at the intersection of climate science, marine science, and policy. Dr. Donner is also a member of Canada's Net Zero Advisory Body, which advises the federal government on pathways to eliminate climate warming emissions. Dr. Dona was lead author of Chapter 3 of the recent 6th Assessment Report of the IPCC, specifically on oceans and coastal ecosystems and their services. His presentation will provide the scientific context to take this event forward. So over to you, Dr. Simon.
Thank you. And thanks to the IUCN for the invitation to speak today. I was one of a team of 12 that worked on the oceans and coastal ecosystems part of the last IPCC assessment. I'll get to the slide in a minute. The report we worked on is about 172, our chapter is about 172 pages long, and it took about 4 years to finish. So this is going to be a very brief introduction to the report. My computer just slowed down here. Give me a second. So the main take home on the climate science in our report is not really a surprise, right? It's things that we've all known and already been alluded to today. That the climate change impacts being felt on being experienced by marine ecosystems around the world. Ranging from actual warming, ocean acidification, impacts on oxygen levels, is really widespread and are having ecosystem impacts. To give you just one example, marine heat waves have become more frequent, more intense, and longer lasting as a result of climate change. And as they become more frequent and more intense, they are more likely to be exceeding the thresholds that many species and organisms have, and ecosystems have. And so these are among the great threats that we see going forward. And so the adaptation challenges we have was one of the big pieces of our assessment. The science I'll say, is in the report is probably less new, but the adaptation assessment was quite new. And just to give you an example of it, this is one of the very complicated figures that people make for IPCC reports, but it's basically going through a series of different types of adaptation, social, institutional, infrastructure and technology, et cetera, and assessing each one of them for what's feasible, is it effective, and you can see at the top, I've just highlighted there that multi-level ocean governance, something that we're talking about a little bit today here, it was seen as clearly feasible, clearly effective, with a high level of confidence in both cases, right? And you'll also notice at the bottom, and the marine protected areas have also highlighted, you'll see the effectiveness there is not written as high. The message on the screen here was one of the key messages that came out of our part of the executive summary of our report, and I cannot stress it enough that what we found was that there are a lot of low-risk adaptation options that we could implement today. They're low risk because in that there's a high certainty that they can be effective, right, and that they have multiple benefits in addition to helping adapt to climate change, right? Multiple benefits in terms of other services that people can benefit from if we're able to use those things. That is things like restoration, revegetation, growing mangroves, for restoring corals, sustainable harvest management, good marine protected area design. These things are effective and low risk, and they're feasible, but they're mostly effective in the lower emission scenarios. When you move into higher emission scenarios, the adaptation options are all higher risk and less certain, and they become things like hardening your shoreline to protect against sea level rise. They become things like realizing that the ecosystem impacts are getting quite severe, and thinking about how to diversify the livelihoods of the community so they're not reliant on the same resources they used to be reliant on, right? So these are things, obviously, that are much bigger challenges. They require real transformational changes, not just in communities, but in the type of governance you're using, right? And so this is one of the key sort of take-homes from our report. When it comes to marine protected areas, which I know is a big subject here, marine protected areas, again, can be effective ways to adapt to climate change, but there's a fundamental limit to in that a marine protected area cannot stop an extreme event, right? But what they can do is reduce the other stressors on the ecosystem and help the system be more resilient to extreme events and to warming, to acidification, etc. Because of that, in the report, if you dig into the details of the report, it will say that the effectiveness of marine protected areas is expected to decline after 2050. And that is because at that point, the increased frequency of and severity of marine heat waves and other things, it's something that a marine heat wave, a marine protected area on its own can't be the solution to. But they can be effective if designed well. What we did find in the assessment is that most marine protected areas as designed today are not effective, right? And it's because they're too small, they're not well connected, and they're too rigid. And the best practice is large marine protected areas that are part of connected networks, so fish can move around, but also have adaptable boundaries, recognizing that the range of a lot of marine species is going to change in the future, and that we need to think about having our marine protected areas being change over time to go with that. And so I'll just give you two examples of an application of this thinking, and this will be really quick. We can just go to the next slide. Thanks. So we did just a couple case studies in the report to give a sense of how to think about different adaptation options as you go forward over time. So this complicated looking diagram is about coral reefs, and what it's showing you is low risk and high risk actions and when you would need to implement them. At what level of warming would we need to start doing that to, and how effective they will be. So for example, the best current management practices in doing coral restoration can be effective today and can be effective when we get to 1.5 degrees of warming, which we're not far from. Much beyond that, they're not very effective on their own, and we need to start looking at other options. You'll see enhanced coral there. That's talking about not classic marine restoration, but actually really targeting the temperature tolerant species and literal like specific phenotypes and genotypes of the coral to make sure they can survive in a warmer climate, and then thinking about diversifying the livelihoods of communities that are really reliant on reefs the way they are today. So this just to give you one example. We did another one, if we can go to the next slide. If we can just go to the next slide. We did a similar assessment also for mangroves. And it's a similar sort of idea, looking at the different options, low-risk options like conservation of mangroves, forest revegetation, and everything. These things are effective today. Going forward, looking into the carbon market, right? How can we raise funds for ecosystem restoration and everything? And then as you go to higher and higher levels of warming, then we're looking at actions that, again, are riskier, more secure, but we think be necessary to help ensure that mangrove ecosystems are still providing the resources that people need going forward in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Donner. It's so critical that science and data should also, make us adaptation decisions, because many a time we think because we are working for conservation and other things will be better, but if we don't know how science and data, impacting, is it really good to invest in those areas which might not have the desired outcome? So we need to be very sure of this. So this is wonderful work, because I would say many a time our projects are not being informed because we just go without doing science-based assessment. Most of the time I have seen it's most socio-economic assessments and not science-based and data-driven. So that's a critical message. Thank you for sharing this, and I would urge all this, online and other, we need to promote this. Otherwise, we are not maximizing on the investment, and that's coming from taxpayers or philanthropists and other. Another area where if we don't integrate from the very beginning, and then we can't maximize on our investment, is gender integration and other. So let's go to you, Genevieve, that how we can move forward with that gender equality, inclusiveness, and partnership. So Genevieve is Mission Inclusion's East Africa Program Director, as well as being a lecturer at University of Quebec in Montreal. So to frame your presentation, we would like to put the question to you: why is gender equality and inclusivity is important in conservation and adaptation?
Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you, everyone. I want to mention that I feel really privileged to be here today on behalf of Mission Inclusion, but also to present the different projects we're working on. So maybe if we can go to the presentation, I would like to just jump onto a quick presentation on Mission Inclusion. So we are a Canadian-based organization working for social justice. We are working internationally. We have offices based in Haiti and in Nairobi, Kenya. Over the last year, we had about 29 projects in 18 countries, and we are very happy over the last 2 years to work with IUCN with a project financed by the Canadian government, Global Affairs Canada, for up to $30 million Canadian. And we are working really on the West Indian Ocean, so the East Africa, in 5 countries. So gender inclusion is so important in the different projects. Gender equality and social inclusion is important because we know that women are many times half of the population. So if we don't do solution based on the whole population and the different needs, what we see is that the solutions lack a realistic way of being implemented and do not benefit to the overall population. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. I would like to go a little bit deeper on the RECE project and present some evidence that we collected at the beginning of the project. So we can move on to the next slide. So just quickly, so our project, as I mentioned, is financed by Global Affairs Canada for 2 years in 5 countries. And the key partners of this project is really the different local governments, national governments also, but really a local organization, whether it is conservation organizations that are regional, but also feminist organization. And we can go to the next slide. This project is embedded into the Great Blue Wall initiative that is really an African-born initiative regarding regenerative seascapes and making sure that how can we really improve how we work with the different communities and the different critical ecosystems in order to integrate really an ocean conservation that is sustainable. So in our project that started last year, we did a data collection at the beginning of the project to be able to identify the baseline. And that was done in 4 of the 5 countries that I've presented. And what was really impactful in that data collection is that we were seeing the real gap between men and women. So here I just have 3 data that I took out of that investigation. So first of all, 60%. So we have 60% of women reporting to have little to no understanding of sustainable practices compared to only 26 men. That is a statistic that was taken out of the Kilifi, Kenya activities Seascape. The second data that I wanted to present to you today was 46%. So in Tanzania, we are working in the Seascape Tanga Pemba, and over there we have 66% of men that consider the blue economy their main source of income, compared to only 46% of women. Moreover, 79% of men are engaged in fishing and aquaculture, compared to only 18% of women. Women are more involved into the less profitable activities, such as coastal agriculture. So therefore, we can see also a disparity in the economic activities and the livelihoods between men and women. And the last number that I wanted to present to you today was 71%. So when we say that 71% of women experience moderate to high economic losses from extreme weather events compared to 62% of men, we also see a breach there and a gap between men and women. So women are particularly affected by their inability to work during these events, reflecting their dependence and reliance on labor-dependent livelihood. That was also taken from Tenga. So when we ask ourselves, why do we need to consider the gender in the different projects, I think that figures like this really shows and reveal the deep gender disparities in knowledge, in economic participation, in climate vulnerability of coastal communities. So I'll be able to give you concrete example on how we can work to diminish and reduce those gaps when we consider that there are differences. How can we work through them?
Thank you, Genevieve. Yeah, when we define a problem, if we, look at everyone from the same eyes, so the problem is then we try to have a size fit all, sort of one size fit all, and that does not work. And that's why it's critical to differentiate between the needs and the problem and then the response. So that's why we will come back more during the panel discussion. So now, next we'll go to Ulrike Cross, uh, Program Manager for Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, Climate Change Program and Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Facility. So Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is a regional conservation trust fund with the mission to ensure continuous funding for conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean, with funding from the donors, most foremost the German government. The CBF has supported over 75 projects. So a lot of experience generated from the field. So could you explain the mechanism by which you are delivering adaptation and biodiversity outcomes? So the integrated approach for coastal and marine seascapes in the Caribbean, what key successes you have to date?
Thank you, Ali, and thank you for having me on this panel. If you can have the first slide, please. Right, so the CBF has 3 programs in total, but I will focus on the climate change program, which I'm heading. And there we have an ecosystem-based adaptation facility. That is a sinking fund, and it is an ICI project funded by the German government through the International Climate Initiative and managed by KfW, the German Development Bank. And the strategic objective of the EBA facility is to sustainably manage EBA supporting marine and coastal habitats, including rehabilitating key biodiversity ecosystems and incorporating social and economic resilience to climate change. So basically, in a nutshell, we give grants to organizations in ODA eligible recipient countries in the insular Caribbean. And the EBA facility so far has given out 34 grants, and we currently have our 5th call for proposal open, so we're inviting more proposals to come. Next slide, please. And I thought Simon has given the perfect introduction to what I'm going to say. We did a survey after the first 4 calls for proposal. First 2 are largely closed, and 3 and 4 are still under implementation. What are the priority ecosystems? And that is really what the applicant decides, what the NGOs, etc., institutions who receive our grants. And mangroves and coral reefs are by far the most important ecosystems to them, which means in terms of conservation, ecosystem services that the people base their livelihoods on and that our people rely on for climate change adaptation and resilience. We also have ridge to reef projects, several forest projects, mostly dry coastal forests, beach, sand dune, lumped together, seagrass beds, slightly less. Agro-silvopastoral, that is not necessarily a combination of everything. It might be an agroforestry system, it might be climate smart agriculture, riparian stabilization, other wetlands and lagoons, and pelagic ocean fish grounds. So a lot of it is also fisheries-based livelihood and sustainable fisheries. Next slide, please. What impacts have we had? Again, we asked our beneficiaries to quantify where we had impacts, and not directly climate impact, but habitat degradation and loss is definitely related and exacerbated by climate change. And the EBA projects could counteract that. Tied for second place, coastal flooding and coastal erosion. And the drivers behind that were generally storms. And if I had the driving force slide here now, winds and the water from storms both tied for first place. So they are by far the most important drivers and stressors on ecosystems. Other forms of land degradation, that could be loss of soil fertility, invasive species taking over, infrastructure loss and damage. You have to bear in mind the Caribbean islands are small in land, large in oceans, so almost everything is very close to the coast. Every airport, every major hangar, storage facility, most major roads are all close to the coastal area and very much threatened by any major event. Sedimentation and turbidity, that relates to ridge to reef. If there's a heavy rain event, any non-protected soil washes out, causes sedimentation on coral reefs. So that is also being kind of mitigated by the EBA project. Eutrophication in some of the coastal, slightly inland waters, and also from runoff from agriculture into the coastal sea. Saltwater intrusion and salinity, that is particular a problem in Haiti that we could reduce, and then a couple of others. So one example I wanted to give maybe from Grenada, which is very recent. The Grenadines, St. Vincent the Grenadines and Grenada have been hit by Hurricane Beryl in July, and the East Coast, which is the most exposed in Grenada, our grantees wrote back to us and said wherever we had the project implemented, the coral restored, the seagrass bed and the mangroves, the coastline withstood the hurricane, whereas the other areas had serious damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrike. EBA approaches which you are employing, that's great to see that, socio-economic and ecological, all three components, unless and until they are implemented concurrently, things can't be, on ground effectively maintained. So that's where many a time adaptation projects, when they are not looking into ecological aspect and only socio-economic, sometimes there is maladaptation. So that's good that all three components being implemented through EBA approaches. So that's wonderful. And then one evidence you just shared that, hurricane and that's having less impact. So, okay, now let's come to Torsten here, Blue Finance Senior Advisor at Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, ORA, and founder of the Global Ocean Trust and affiliate scholar at the IEASS. He's also a strategic advisor to IUCN's Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility. So, in your experience, what are the key factors for scaling successful regenerative seascapes model, such as nature-based solutions for adaptation? We have seen, many, if I can say, boutique projects, little bit, which are not at scale. So how to go at scale?
Yes, thank you very much. Delighted to be here, and that is indeed a big, big challenge. And I think we have already talked about the first part, what makes the nature-based solution itself resilient, and that already is a challenge. It's that integration of these various components of livelihoods, opportunities, including gender-positive opportunities, and revenue pathways around that. So, for instance, with the Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility, we supported in the Philippines local communities that got into seaweed farming, and that meant that there was less fishing pressure on the area. It meant that the seaweed farms could be put in formats so that they actually encouraged marine protected areas in the space. They used the common watchtowers, so they actually supported each other. But then exactly this challenge arose: how do we integrate that into a broader seascape approach? And it turns out that there are two particular pathways that I think are interesting here, and I want to mention both of them. The Seaweed project showed one pathway, which is that corporate value chains need to be linked with these types of opportunities. A lot of the challenges local seaweed farmers had was that they were just selling their seaweed off to middlemen. They had very low margins, they had very low ability to actually invest in quality setups. And so we helped this particular project to actually grow their logistics setup so that they could then engage directly with one of the global companies in that space. So all of a sudden that local nature-based solutions project had higher margins, direct exposure to the larger corporates, and the larger corporate had an opportunity to show in their own reporting the reputation side that they were engaging with real functioning local communities. So it was win-win for both sides. So I think that kind of corporate insetting, that linkage with industries that are needing supplies from those nature-based communities is a key pathway. The other critical pathway, I think, and we wrote about this as an outcome document, a knowledge document, is what we call blue infrastructure. So where large-scale infrastructures are being designed, it is really important that we don't think of them as standalone infrastructure and then the whole communities around it and the whole ecosystem around aren't integrated. By integrating them into the equation, not only do we allow the nature-based solution to help deliver outcomes for the broader project, we also create the financing flows into that. And so take a very simple example, a large port project, if it considers the wetlands around it as part of the management of the water and uses that for better biodiversity and creates carbon sinks as part of that process, all of a sudden you have an integrated financing approach. And so we are working at the moment with the larger multilateral development banks to move from what they have already signed up to, which is a sustainable blue economy, so doing good investments, to what we now call a sustainable and regenerative blue economy. And we've written about that with IUCN to show that that kind of restorative, regenerative approach that is about impact and outcomes is so meaningful because it allows the nature-based solutions to really deliver and allows the large public development finance institutions to get much more active in this space because they looked at the space and they thought, oh, these individual projects we can't support, they don't fit into our bigger approach. Working with Seascapes, working with larger infrastructure is a way for them to come in. So we see a real shift here.
Thank you. It's so critical that market and market forces need to be looked into. We can't just conserve and then expect local communities will reap the benefits. So it is to look into market flows and other and then bring them into that. I have another question because I know you have to go. Can you provide international context within which operating, for example, looking forward to the Ocean Conference 2025, what are the key barriers to address and outcomes we need from this to have the vision of climate resilient, regenerative seascapes a reality?
Yeah, so this is a really important next step. So we will be assembling the UN Ocean Conference in Nice in June, and I think as part of the build-up, they identified 3 absolutely key parts to delivering a strong outcome in Nice. And the first part is on science. So we're having a science congress in the run-up. And actually what is very interesting about the approach to that science congress is it has a much broader range beyond just natural science. And so integrating social science, integrating a much more community-based approach will deliver really important messaging out of the Science Congress. Then I'm involved with what is called the Blue Economy Finance Forum. So that's really saying, well, where is that matrix of blue finance solutions that can then be supported from that more political approach? And how can we bring in what we have already learned? And then thirdly, and that's back to the seascapes and the resilience, there's a whole session workflow around CTs, the coastal cities, coastal regions to think seascape. Because it's the actors at the municipal and regional level that need to have the tools to actually integrate all of that. So bringing that together means that we then, at the political level at the UN Ocean Conference, can actually support on the basis of facts and real opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to know that science, market, and then also the actors who are involved over there, you are bringing them all together. I think these are the things which will make these things happen. Otherwise, if you look around, many a time we churn out project after project and there's no impact. So key is what we are discussing now: science, gender integration, evidence from the field, having all 3 aspects: socio-economic and ecological, and then bringing all those at a landscape, seascape level where the actors and stakeholders are involved. So great, thanks a lot. I know, Dr. Donor and Thurston, you have to leave. So thank you for your presence. Let's give them a big applause. So now we will move to the panel section of the event, which will focus on bringing science, partnerships, and climate finance together for regenerative and climate resilient seascapes. So now I will invite Professor Cecil, is Professor of Marine Biology and the head of the laboratory EcoSeas, Ecology and Conservation Science for Sustainable Seas. She is also the Vice President for International Affairs. And Dr. Lewis is a renowned agriculture scientist and Director General of KT Tropical Agriculture Research and Higher Education Center in Costa Rica. Thank you. So now let's start. Dr. Professor Cecil, Dr. Lewis, we will have, you're prominent scientists, and across the sector of marine and coastal ecosystem, as well as nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation. So what you think we can, do a variety of work around marine ecosystems, protected areas management, and you are head of, you are head of EcoSeas also. So what you can share with the group about the latest research, how that can have, will help and do the impact level because many a time we stop at output level. How we can work towards impact and how science can help us on that.
Thank you. First, thank you for the invitation. So I would like to highlight two main points regarding marine protected areas, as Simon already said previously. We are talking about marine protected areas, so that means that if we want to protect them, they need to be enforced. And it's very important because a lot of marine protected areas are not really enforced. So that means that we have to sit all together to work together with all stakeholders, all parties, and especially small-scale fisheries and fishermen, I should say women, because for a lot of South countries, it's the women that are dealing with fishing. And so it's really important to have everybody on board. And the other thing is that we have also to help to train to use the science, to train marine protected area managers to monitor how to monitor these marine protected areas. Simon told us about the effectiveness. We have to prove the effectiveness of these nature-based solutions. And we have to prove the effectiveness of marine protected areas, and that's where science can help. Science can provide exact data, and can help also the managers to monitor their marine protected areas, and we can train them, for example, for new techniques such as environmental DNA or using artificial intelligence. So we can also help to improve the marine protected areas.
Thank you. Yeah, AI and science, I think the progress which is being made is phenomenal, and we hope that will also help in adaptation. So that's great to see that work has been started and will help us hopefully in making informed decisions based on the projections, based on previous mistakes or other. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, Dr. Lewis, you have been working on ecosystem-based adaptation, which we heard initially from Ulrike also a lot. So what are your experiences, and can you share more what's going on, how to make EBA more effective?
Yes. I would like to tell you that we participate in a specific project in Dominican Republic, and that was the conservation of the mangroves in a region of Montecristi. And our institute, CATIE, is making research in good agricultural practices that we are doing to have an impact in the oceans. And for example, in this region, there are two major crops that are impacting the region of Montecristi. One is bananas and the other one is rice. In both crops, in Dominican Republic, they are working in an organic way, and this was a very good and positive impact in the ecosystem in Montecristi. And we are based in Costa Rica, and in Costa Rica we are making also research in mangrove, and we know that the most important pollution that we have in Costa Rica in the banana plantation is using the fertilizer, especially nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as the application that the people are doing to controlling black sigatoka with fungicides. And that is something that for us was very important, and also to tell the communities that keeping this system of good organic production, because that helps to the ocean and helps to the mangrove ecosystems. Another good implementation that we did is to engage the community and that they can understand the importance of all the activity that they are doing, because that has an impact in the mangroves ecosystems. And this was very important because in some cases, in the training activities that we did, the people were not very well understand the importance of the community actions and in the impact of this ecosystem. And that was, for us in CATI, was a very good result, because the community understand and they will keeping the good practices. Another good thing that we saw, and that is that in this region, the people are also using a silvopastoral system in which they are planting trees. And planting trees is a very good activity also, because the planting trees in this silvopastoral system is a filter, and is, I will say, is helping also the mangroves ecosystems to keep in a very good quality of I will say, the filter for the water that is coming. And another point that we were doing is, because I was visiting the region 2 weeks ago, and we are making reforestations, because there is a watershed, the Rio Marajeripe, and this river is the sources of water that the people are using in the rice and also the bananas. And when we are keeping when making the reforestation, there is less erosion, there is less pollution in this ecosystem of the mangrove. I will say that this is the most important activities and impact that we have in this specific ecosystem.
Thank you, Dr. Lois. Yeah, pollution and other, we can do all these projects and all that, and if, these chemicals keep coming into the, project sites, those will have negative impact. And many a time you can keep your project boundaries, and other, all the, organic farming and all that, but with rain runoff and other thing. So it's at times very challenging how you can make all this very effective when the rest of the landscape and other, they are not using organic, fertilizers and others. So that's challenge. So thank you for sharing this. Let's come back to now implementation, Ulrike. With these challenges and with the need for knowledge and science to inform, project development and all this. So what at CBF, how you're looking into making, coastal and marine ecosystem-based adaptation long-term successful?
Yeah, when we select our projects, we really look at certain criteria that are discussed with an EBA committee. At the very beginning, we looked at all the 3 EBA pillars are there: the conservation pillar, the climate change adaptation, and the socioeconomic livelihood pillar. Unless they are balanced, it's not going to work. I think that came out from several presentations this afternoon. Because unless people can make a living from the ecosystem and ecosystem services, they're not going to conserve them. That, of course, involves a participatory process right from the beginning at project inception. It is not something that you get the money to implement a project and then invite stakeholders and tell them there's an opportunity. They have to be there very much at the concept note stage. When it comes to the biophysical interventions, we look at addressing root causes whenever possible. A prime example there is the mangrove ecosystem. I would say in 90% of our projects, it is not necessary to replant mangroves or replant at any scale. It is a matter of preparing, restoring the habitat, restoring mostly hydrology to where it should be, and then most mangroves regenerate very nicely, naturally. You might have some large areas of dieback where you want to seed some pockets in certain places, but we try to avoid wasting money by large-scale replanting into habitat that is not suitable. Coral restoration, that was the other major ecosystem. There, of course, we cannot address the root causes on the small islands. We have sea level, sea temperature warmings, ocean water acidity, coral bleaching, several diseases. So as Simon said, we are now looking at the supercorals, trying to get as many survivors of those harsh events. We had 2 years of extreme ocean temperatures, and where we find some corals looking healthy, that is where our grantees take the explants from. And then there are several different philosophies, and I think all have merits in different places. Some use sexual propagation, others use very dispersed sampling, and then bring the clonals together that they have an allelic diversity. Once they reach maturity to breed naturally, the sexual diversity will come in. So there are a couple of interesting approaches, and we actually have a network where all these coral scientists are now exchanging the pros and cons of each of those approaches. And for me, as a plant pathologist by training, it is very interesting to see. And finally, and Ali, you mentioned that is sustainability. We want to see that people think from the beginning of the project how those outcomes will be sustained and maintained, how the livelihoods are actually viable on their own after the project ends. And with that, I think we have been able to select a lot of successful and impactful projects so far.
Thank you, Ulrike. So this is another project. At times, blindly we start investing in ecosystems and other, whereas the challenges are more than or beyond our capacities and resources and investment. So that's again going on a lot globally. We have seen so many restoration efforts failing because they don't take into account what would be the projections, what would be the choices of species. And mangroves is one area there are the most failure in the world because, sometimes cutback of fresh water, and you're just planting mangroves without looking at whether after a few years there will be water or not water, sea level rise. And then due to sea level rise, sometimes sand accumulation starts more, and we know mangroves survive more in muddy areas. So there are so many factors. So adaptation has its limitations also, and we need to be cognizant of those facts. And maybe in some areas, we need to do managed retreat. We need to accept that these things will not be surviving in next few years and all this. So investing into black hole, and that to someone else's money, taxpayers, we need to be very cognizant of that. So thank you, Ulrike. Coming back to you, Genevieve, with science and all that, many a time, again, your area of expertise, mission inclusion, gender remains marginalized. We think, okay, we are making now science, economy, and all. So in blue economy, where there's so much market forces and other, how do you ensure that gender is an integral part of our decision making?
Thank you, Ali. So I think that this is a key question. So how do we ensure that into the Blue Economy Initiative, we have really an integrated approach? So basically, I think we need to see the Blue Economy also as marine conservation, really with nature-based solution, and also governance. So we need to make sure that when we arrive in a community and we decide to work with, let's say, a group of women that are working different economic initiatives, we need to make sure that we also work in the context, in the environmental environment, and we make sure that we restore and try to have those nature-based solutions worked for the community. And then we also need to make sure that locally and regionally and nationally, if it's possible, we have the right person at the table to make decision and to make sure that if there is an economic activity that has future, that has really a scale-up opportunity, that it can be done, that there will not be barriers. And whenever we look at different economic activity, the importance of really ensuring that women are involved in participating in those activities, it's really, from one example, I was in Comoros a couple of months ago, and in Comoros I was talking with the communities and one of the local organizations there, and there was this great idea to make sure that we try to conserve the local area, marine area, but unfortunately that caused trouble to some of the women that were there, because it was their main location when they were going to take the shellfish and bring them to the market. So there was this great initiatives, but then it sort of was hard to move through it because it wasn't positive for the community and for the women. So when we think about blue economies activity and how we can make sure to have a social inclusion plan working on this, I think that it's really important. The key steps that I will present is that we need to make sure that we understand the social dynamics and the differential impacts to understand the views and perception of the communities. And then we need to define the space and context through a real inclusive participation that can be done with gender equality and social inclusion strategy, let's say, to really make sure that we tackle the right problems with the right solutions. And then make sure that we ensure equitable distribution of benefits. How do we compromise if there's a compromise to make? And in that situation, if we want to conserve and make sure that we are putting up an environment that is positive and sustainable, how do we do it if sometimes it can cause some problems in economic activities that were there before? How do the community can try to balance with all of that? And to do that, we need to make sure that everyone is seated at the table and are part of the conversation. And then to make sure that we have a participative and inclusive governance, so that once again in the different governance instances, that we make sure that women are participating. And what does that entail? So what is it that we need for the women to be participating? Sometimes they might need to understand what are the processes, but also they need time, so we need to make sure that their meetings are in the schedule that will work for them, and all of those details that sometimes we just think that it's easy and that we need to ask for more participation of women, but the real idea is to make sure that the structural way to do things, we go deeper and we make sure that why is the participation at this level and how can we make it a little bit further. So in blue economy, I would say, in summary, I would say that we need to make sure that blue economy activities are part of a holistic way of working with conservation, nature-based solution, and governance also, and that we have a clear and strategic plan to and make sure that everyone is really involved, and that entails to have some financing that is also gender finance, and to have disaggregated data that are really specific data for the different part of the population, whether it's youth, women, and men. And also we need to make sure that we do the evaluation on indicators that are also really looking at inclusion in the different activities.
Thank you, Genevieve. Yeah, again, at times, we have seen and observed maybe more than hundreds of projects on that. Gender remains like a checklist exercise. You go there, okay, tick mark, gender participation, women participation, tick mark. You went over there, how many women were sitting in the room? 50% tick mark. And the point is that they are part of the decision making. They are making the decision, not the number of women who are sitting in the room. And again, if we look at their life, then in many rural areas they start at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and then whole day. And then here we are going into our 4x4 vehicles, with the DSA, which is more than the monthly income of those women. And then we go and then they wait for us in a school or community center, and then we do the tick mark exercise. No, that's rather, I could say, it's criminal. We need to, gender integration must be non-negotiable, and it's gender responsive and transformation. We need to move towards that end. Otherwise, we are doing on paper and all those things, and then very, proudly saying we have gender integration and all that, but it's not happening. They must be part of the decision making. Co-creation, co-implementation, that's the key, which is not happening. We need to educate our donors also. It's not that you develop the whole project and then you go and say, okay, you people have problem over here, we have a solution for you, come. And their participation means they're saying yes, so that we need to go beyond that. So thanks for sharing these, and also the approaches you mentioned, inclusivity and then other empowerment, those things are critical. Now I'll come back to you, Professor Cecil. Here at the COP also, everybody, we all are talking about nature-based solutions and all that. And many a time, if I could say, we are lost in translation. We just get fixated on terminologies and, okay, this is nature-based solutions and all this. How could we ensure that conservation principles are, ensured in that when we are talking about NBS?
Yeah, thank you. So there are several ways to monitor the effectiveness of this nature-based solution, but I would like to come back and again say through things about governance. We are also working on governance. We are working on biodiversity, but also on governance system, and it's super important to have everybody around the table. And for that, we are working also with social scientists, for example, for civil society consultation, but also to work with all stakeholders, companies, and everybody involved in for example, marine protected areas. And as you already stressed, that it's a co-creation process. It's really important that everybody has to be around the table from the beginning. And I would like just to give one example. We are working on several projects and several different countries, for example in Costa Rica, but also East Africa and France, of course. And for example, in the Bay of Nice, the city, the mayor of Nice wants to create a new marine protected area, but it's in Nice, it's a urban area, so it's a huge challenge. And we started 3 years ago to put everybody, all stakeholders around the table, and it's a co-creation process. That means that we have to design the areas that will be enforced, that will be strongly protected, but we have to respect also the work of fishermen, the work, for example, the diving clubs, and all people that are using the ocean, that are working on the sea. And the other thing that is really important also, if we want to scale up, is that we have to raise awareness, public awareness. We have to educate people. We have to be sure that they will respect what we want to create, and yeah. So that's also an important process.
Thank you. Yeah, process-oriented approaches, they are good. Many a time we think we are the expert and we come with solutions and we impose solution. Rather, at times I say we look for problems where we, can say, okay, our solution is on that. So we have solutions first, and then we look for problems to apply those. So thank you for this. I'll come to you, Dr. Lewis. adaptation is so multifaceted, multidisciplinary. One organization can't have all the expertise to, have that, to have an effective adaptation. So would you share, based on your experience in the region, how, partnership and what partnership can make things better?
Yes, that is totally true. The partnership is fundamental if we want to have an impact. I will make a summary of what is the most important. The first one is to have engaged the community. The community that are close to the ecosystem must be the main actor, because if they are making pollution, if they are not taking care of the system, and they don't understand the importance of the ecosystem, in the case of the mangrove, I believe that this is the crucial partnership that we have to have. Another partner that for me is very important is the local governments. The local governments have to play a key role in all of this governance of the ecosystems. And this is the reason because we are interested always to have, as the Ministry of Environment as well as the Ministry of Agriculture, both of them must be also working in this approach. Even though it's important also to bring on the table the Ministry also of Health, because this is part of the One Health system. Everybody has to play a role. I believe this is a key partnership. But for sure, we have also to have partners like, for example, people that are doing science and people that are also supporting development project like your organization, USA, like also the organization of Ulrike that is making the financing, the Caribbean funds, and also to have the IKI, for example, from Germany, because was also part of the donor. I believe this integration between donors, communities, scientists, and government make sure that the impact that we will have in an ecosystem will be in a good address. And at the end, let me tell you something that, for example, this project that we were working in mangroves in Dominican Republic finished 2 years ago. But 2 weeks ago, I was visiting the place also. And we have partners that they want to continue, because the problem of the project is that has a beginning and an end. But Dominican Republic is member of CATIE. And that means that our mandate is to support and to assist Dominican Republic. And for example, right now, we are working with Plan Sierra in order to make deforestation of the old watershed that is also giving the water for this ecosystem. And there are a mission of our forest scientists that are coming to Dominican Republic at the first week of January, and to try to support the Plan Sierra in order to deforestation. Another support that we are doing is we have an incubator of business. That is Activa. Activa is working to make and support farmers or communities of cooperative in making business. And I believe that if the community has some business very close to the ecosystem and they can earn some money, that is a way also to keep the conservation and the restoration of this ecosystem. And this is the reason because Activa is coming also in this mission to support these organizations that are trying to start this small business in the neighborhood of this ecosystem.
Thank you. Yeah, partnerships, they make things happen and all that. And in each partnership, as you said, there should be some win for everyone. Because unless and until 2 plus 2 is more than 4, partnership won't sustain. We need to work on partnership which will make, things much better. What we can't do on our own, then things, grow and better. Thank you very much for your thoughts, insightful remarks, and other we are at COP. So if I say just not more than 1 minute, rather 30 seconds, one key thing, you want innovative or, something which can be changed, what would you suggest, as a key message, okay, if that change happens, things could be much more better or some any innovation. So just 30 seconds each if you can. Yeah.
Okay, so I can start. Two or three words: collaboration, all together, and sharing data. All above all, sharing data.
Wonderful.
Excellent. So I will go with real localization and participation of the communities and really hopefully real gender work in the different texts that are being negotiated this week.
And I would say because eBay facility works with projects, we really need mainstreaming, so we do need the private sector and we need government support. And we have governments here, but we really have to make them aware and engage them in our projects, that they see the value of them and are willing to include them in their programmatic budgets for the long time.
In my case, I believe that we have to use the information that we generate from the projects, and specific the innovation, and specific the results, because we have wonderful projects, but the project finish and we are not using the results. And I believe that this is very important. For example, in this project of mangrove, we have very good results, and we have to continue to support in the communities and try to follow up all these good results in order that has an impact in the community.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We saw over here that so many good things may happen if we have integrated approaches, science and data informing us, integration of gender, men, women, youth, elderly, indigenous knowledge, inclusive indigenous people's knowledge, other, that all need to be part of it. We need to make co-design, co-create and co-implement, and then partnerships will enhance that, and then sustain funding, which is not just project-oriented approaches, but program-oriented approaches at landscape. Then things will go. All the work which NGO or organizations like us do, we just demonstrate things, these things can happen. But then what you said, Ulrike, that the governments need to take ownership. Unless and until they will take things forward, at scale things won't happen. Public sector needs to come into play. Thank you very much for your time and effort over there, and thank you for taking time. You all still remaining here. So thanks a lot. And let's have a group photo.
Yes.